Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. Happy 2024 and all that jazz. So, yeah, this is the last video I will have talking about 2023, obviously. This is everything I've read in December, so I'm just going to go ahead and get y'all right to that. I finished Foxglove, which is book 2 in the Belladonna series, and this one continues to follow Signa, Blythe, and Death, and it introduces a new character, Fate, as well as mentions the character of Life. And this was a pretty interesting mystery. I did feel like there could be some more character development in it, and that parts went slow, but I did still enjoy it, and I'm definitely interested to see Wisteria, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be more focused on Blythe, and some things that were developed in this book. So that will be out next August, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I do definitely recommend this series if you like gothic atmospheres. And yeah, like I said, it was enjoyable. It is YA, so that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, that if you don't like YA, you may not like this as much. So I read my second Elizabeth Acevedo book, and this one was The Poet X, which follows Xiomara, who is raised in a very religious household by parents who had her when she was very much older, and so she has to try to come to terms with the fact that she questions some things about Christianity, the fact that her mother is much stricter on her than her brother. For example, Xiomara has to do the wash, has to clean the bathroom, wash the dishes, which isn't a big deal, but her brother has to do none of this, and so she kind of battles with that. She is Catholic, so she's going to confirmation classes, and of course that brings up a lot of questions. And I feel like this is just a very strong coming of age story, and shows how girls and women can sometimes be pushed into, you have to be quieter, more feminine, don't fight, don't, protest. Oh, if those men are catcalling you, you must be doing something to tempt them. Even though, really, Xiomara just wears normal clothes, t-shirts, jeans, and hoodies. And she does have people who do that because she is well developed. And, obviously that bothers her a lot. And it's kind of she's been constantly told that it's on her, it's her fault this is happening, and she just doesn't agree with that. But this is also a very good coming of age story, where she has some fights with her mother and has to kind of learn to be able to stand up for herself, but also still be, at least, be respectful when doing it, and explain kind of why she feels the way she does and such. And she does a lot of this through poetry, and I absolutely love that. And this is a book written in free verse as well, and so I think it all works very, very well. And it's very well written, in my opinion. And I did enjoy the first book I read by Elizabeth Acevedo, and that was With the Fire on High, and that has a lot of the same themes. And this one, I do have quite a few quotes from the poems, So this is Shiomara, and she's talking about her name and how her mother thought her name was the name of a saint. And she says, "My parents probably wanted a girl who would sit in the pews, wearing pretty florals and a soft smile. They got combat boots and a mouth silent until it's as sharp as an island machete." And then she has questions about this. She says, "Without Mommy's Rikers Island prison-like rules, I don't know who I would be when it comes to boys. How does a girl like me figure out the weight of what it means to love a boy?" And she has her twin brother, and she says, "I fought. I never told her, Mommy, he didn't fight, because my hands became fists for him. My hands learned how to bleed when other kids tried to make him into a wound." And then she has another poem about how she feels about attention, the way that all the men, could stop and look at her with that. "If Medusa was Dominican and had a daughter, I think I'd be her. I look and feel like a myth, a story distorted, waiting for others to stop and stare. If Medusa was Dominican and had a daughter, she might wonder at this curse, at how her blood is always becoming some fake hero's mission, something to be slayed, conquered." And then when her mother finds this journal that she's been writing the poems in, she decides to burn it. And when this happens, she says, "My anger wants to become a creature, but I keep it collared because this is my mother, and I am sorry that I ever thought my thoughts were mine." I just feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to at some point in their life. You always feel like when you're going to question things at some point, and your parents may not always like that, and I feel like that captures it very, very well. So yeah, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on the Poet X, and like I said, overall it's just a really well written book, and I feel like it's something that everybody can really relate to on one level or another, and I really enjoy the writing. And right now I have one more book by Elizabeth Avosaddo, and that is Clap When You Land, and that one is also in verse, so I will probably be reading that, if not this month, then next month. Poet Warrior is Jo Harjo's second memoir. Her first one was Crazy Brave, which I read several years ago, and this is a very moving memoir. It deals with a lot of life, a very hard life, and kind of generational anger and trauma that comes from different things. So Joy Harjo is the U.S. Poet Laureate, and she is part of the Muskogee or Creek tribe of natives. And the way she writes this memoir, she intersperses it with a story about a character that's done in like a traditional Creek way, and she also intersperses some of her poems and some poems that have inspired her. And she talks a lot about, connecting with nature and respecting all people regardless of, if what faith they are, if they're a man or a woman, or, anything like that. Everybody is a person. And that message, I feel like it comes through very strongly in this memoir. And this one is a little broader, I think, than Crazy Brave. So I definitely recommend them both. And they're definitely, like I said, both very moving. So yeah, hopefully y'all will pick this up and just kind of get an idea of what Joy Harjo is like. So I finished Slewfoot by Brahm, and this is the first book I've read by him, and it was actually pretty good. And it follows Abatha and her husband Edward and his older brother Wallace in a small Puritan village in the year 1666, so kind of right in the middle of the witch trial hysteria. And I feel like it deals with like hysteria and the fear of, if you don't condemn somebody everybody else is condemning, then you'll be condemned. And it also deals, of course, with how unfair things could be for women back then, really in general, how unfair things could be for those who are perceived as different. Because Edward is possibly autistic, possibly he just has social anxiety. It's mentioned that, he has a hard time speaking. It's not that he doesn't know what he wants to say, he just has a hard time getting it out. And so his older brother takes advantage of this. And when Edward dies, it comes out that Wallace has put up his farm for not Edward's debts, but for Wallace's debts. And yet Edward is buying this farm from Wallace. And so Wallace is so worried about losing his farm that when Edward dies, he thinks that he can just wrest it from Abatha. And when he cannot, he decides to accuse her of being a witch. And this is one of those where, what if she actually was a witch? And I do find it interesting in how, she's not a witch from the beginning. She just knows how to make herbal medicine to, help with measles, for example, is one of the things that happens in the book. And this eventually, through different things, the meeting of Slewfoot turns into actual powers. And so it was definitely interesting to see. This is definitely a revenge story, and it can be quite bloody, and it can also be very irksome at times, with the way that, it's so obvious that, okay, if Abatha really was a witch, why could you all catch her? Couldn't she use her powers to escape? And that's not really addressed, but from my understanding, that's not something that was ever really thought about in the actual witch trials either. So, yeah, definitely an interesting read. And it was a pretty quick read as well. It's just over 300 pages. And I won't say it necessarily flies by, but it all feels very cohesive and atmospheric. And if you're into horror and revenge stories, I would say this is definitely a good one. Assistant to the Villain is based on a series of TikToks that I have not seen, but I'd heard about the book and my library had it, so I decided to read it. It wasn't bad, but there were parts that were extremely eye-roll worthy and were extremely just cliche. Unless you really like romantasy, I would probably give this a skip, to be quite honest, because it just kind of has all those romantasy tropes. Not very much world building, not very much character building. It's just kind of really surface level, which is okay, but is not something that I always enjoy, and this is not one of the times I enjoyed it. So, if you're just looking for something very easy, or like I said, if you're really, really into romantasy, I think you might enjoy this. And there were some parts that were funny enough. So I did give it 3 stars. So like I said, it's not horrible, just not quite what I was looking for. Bright Young Women was very well written. I felt like the characters were well done, and the plot was pretty well done. The only main issue I had with this is it was kind of hard to categorize. It's not quite a thriller, it's not quite a police procedural, it's not quite crime, but it was good. I do definitely recommend it, and it was a very quick read as well, and parts of it will make you angry just seeing how these women are treated and overlooked and everything. And I think this is definitely an interesting look at, the famous serial killer from the 70s here in America. So yeah, this was definitely a good one, and I do have to say I really like the colors on the cover as well. So that's how I finished out 2023. I read 368 books, I believe it was. Actually, let me check real quick on Goodreads. According to Goodreads, in 2023, and it's not going to tell me. Well, never mind. Goodreads will not tell me. I believe, anyways, it was 368. So yeah, it was a pretty good reading year for me, all things considered. As you've seen here, I have a lot of manga that I've read. And yeah, so I hope you all had a happy new year, as I said before. And if you want to see more videos from me, hit that subscribe button. And I will see you again next time in the book cave.